Hi, everyone. This is me, seemingly yelling at a nun, but in actual fact, I was preparing for a career in programming. Not that I knew it at the time, but this is how it all began. So I had a 7-year career as an opera singer, and this career took me all over the world. And what it did was 3 things that I think prepared me to be a programmer. The first is that I was able to tame my ego, so that I was therefore able to be open to learning new systems. And from there, I was able to take those systems to solve certain problems. And this has led me to the situation I'm in today. So let's talk about the ego. This is also me. Much like Marcellina from The Marriage of Figaro, the ego thinks it's always right, it has nothing to learn, and it's always in control. Now, unfortunately, this is not great for fostering a learning mindset. This is something that closes you off. But this is Tim. Tim was a coach at Hessen State Theatre, where I worked for 3 years. And his job, what a coach does, is he's someone that I pay money to tell me how terrible I am at opera and at singing. And he wasn't the only one. He wasn't the only person who told me how terrible I was. Vocal coaches, teachers, chorus masters, conductors, directors, language coaches, colleagues, all of these people were people that over the years I paid thousands of dollars to tell me all the many little ways that I could become better at this incredibly complex art form. And what it felt like was that I was standing on the edge of a cliff, and what it resulted in was that I stomped down my ego. And it sounds like a bad thing. It wasn't fun sometimes, but it was a good thing for fostering what I call a learning mindset. I believe that in order to be successful at learning, you have to have a learning mindset and not a proving yourself mindset. And that itself ties into a very common problem in programming, which is imposter syndrome. And by having a learning mindset rather than a proving yourself mindset, I think that you can avoid that. And that's what I hope to do with my ability to tame my ego that I got from opera. But of course, the great thing is that now that I've got my first job as a junior software engineer at Novatech Consulting, I no longer have to pay other people thousands of euros to tell me how bad I am. It turns out they'll pay me. So I'm really happy about that. But of course, there's not much point in having this great mindset about learning if you can't learn systems. So music, much like programming, has its own systems that you have to learn in order to make sense of a piece, right? You have a project that you're working on, and you have to work out how all the different bits fit together in order to make that project make sense. And this is one of the systems. The first, most obvious one is that you have to learn the language of music itself. This is called a circle of fifths. It helps you learn major keys, minor keys, relative minors, chord progressions. And of course, you have to learn notation. You have to be able to read music, understand rhythms, and so on. But it's not just the language of music. I had to sing in Russian, German, French, English, Czech, and I think I've forgotten one, Italian, of course. And to do that, we had to learn the International Phonetic Alphabet fluently, so to speak. And these are just vowels. This is a vowel chart. It shows you where in the mouth every vowel happens. And my scores would have these all through. The other thing about opera is it's often called the Olympic sport of singing because it involves so much physical activity. If you don't know already, opera has no microphones, there's no amplification. So you also have to learn about anatomy so that you can actually learn how to project your voice over 40 plus orchestral players. And as if that wasn't enough, you also have to dance, move, act, and accurately portray a character while completing all of the rest of what I've said to an exceptionally high level. So there are a lot of different systems you have to learn, right? But what's the point in learning the systems? Right? Well, much as with programming, you don't just learn a programming language to learn a programming language, you learn it to solve a problem. And here is the problem we want to solve. I call this the wow effect. You want your audience to feel wowed by your performance. And you have all these systems in place that you've learned, all these conventions and quirks that you have to use. And this is one of them. This is called a fermata. It's a musical symbol that means to hold a note. The most famous example could be Vincero from nessun dorma, right? So it's a held note, this chair, that's a held note or a fermata, but it's not always a held note or a fermata. Here, when I sang this aria, it would be mi fo guitarra, right? But it still looks exactly the same. So I have to know all about the conventions, what style I'm singing in, who the character is, in order to accurately interpret this problem and solve it to create a wow effect. And we did this quite literally by writing on our scores. This is called marking up a score. On my score, of course, as a singer, I would also have the International Phonetic Alphabet and a direct translation of the piece above it as well. But you use all of those systems I described to work out how to interpret this piece. And this is much like in programming, if someone comes to you and says, hey, I want a website to sell books. Well, great, but you have to know, okay, what do I do with this? How do I solve this problem? How do I use all these languages I know to come to a solution that can give a wow effect? So when I say being an opera singer prepared me for a programming career, hopefully that statement doesn't seem so odd to you now, and you can see how breaking down the ego, learning different systems, and then utilizing those systems to solve problems is much the same process. So the natural next question is, well, if they have so much in common, what don't they have in common? Well, firstly, I never got an email from a recruiter asking me to do an opera role, unfortunately. Secondly, opera requires peak physical fitness. And lastly, the opera industry is desperate for more men. Thank you so much. And follow me on Twitter.